and us who have devoted our careers to, covering professional baseball and covering the Mets in particular. And to that end, I want to point out that Howie Karpin is here with us. He has covered the Mets and the Yankees for decades and is an official scorer as well for both the Mets and the Yankees. Russ Cohen is here. Of course, people know him from the hockey side and the baseball side, and he's doing a lot of Mets memorabilia, Mets memorabilia reporting for us this year. So, Russ, welcome. And of course, we got Mark and AJ down at Clover Park in Port St. Lucie. And
gotta love it.
Listen, you got to cut to the chase for us here. I heard Steve Cohen say the other day, 3 years of being an owner, this is the best vibe he's ever felt down in Port St. Lucie at spring training. Well, listen. Everybody, I think even at the Pittsburgh Pirates camp right now, they're fired up to get going. So you tell me what the actual vibe is. Is it different? Is there really a difference going into this camp that you have felt so far?
There is absolutely a difference. And every guy that I spoke today, I actually asked them that. I said, the owner said in the 3 years walking around the locker room, he says there is a vibe. And what I got from the vibe is there is zero ego in that locker room. That's the one thing you take away. They are all hyper-focused on winning a championship. And I think they also, I spoke to Steve about this, the family atmosphere. I think they look at themselves as a family. They look at themselves as this band of brothers. And you're right. The Pittsburgh Pirates right now also do. But I'm old enough to remember Willie Stargell and the We Are Family 1979 Pirates. And this kind of has that vibe. Even the guys that might be on the bubble all know, that like John Curtis said that, look, he knows there are guys on that line where he is that are not going to make the team now, but are going to have a significant role on this team going forward. And to be able to know that in spring training, when you're one of those guys on the bubble, says a lot about A, Buck, and B, the atmosphere that's in that clubhouse. They all pull for each other. Listen, Danny Mendick is a great clubhouse guy. He is kind of redundant to Luis Guillorme. But when I asked Buck about this kid, he raved about him, and he's almost to the point where I think he's going to try and find a spot for him because of the quality guy he is. And I think that's what Billy Epler really honed in. I don't know from the outside, Jimmy, looking, the daily reports, if you've gotten that same sense.
Can I jump in for 1 second, Jim? Because one of the things I know something different thing I remember was the 93 Mets, 91, 2 Mets, like Brett Saberhagen and Eddie Murray and Vince Coleman and the Firecrackers. And they really had a contempt for the fans. I don't think they get that from real close to the fans. The fans love them. It's a nice situation. They're really going to see something to say.
Yeah, I think one of the things that set apart last year's Mets team, and I think what you're saying is it's carried over because a lot of the same guys are returning. Even though there was a lot of upheaval this offseason, a lot of the key guys are returning. That was a great clubhouse. And you've touched on that. But really it started, that transformation and trying to get the right guys, not only the right players, but the right guys, the Eduardo Escobars, the Starling Martes. Those were valuable additions, not only for what they do on the field, but for how they conduct themselves in the clubhouse, how they are as professionals. And then you've already had some of those guys in place even prior to last year with Pete Alonso and Lindor. And then you add a Max Scherzer, of course, who's that dominant type A personality, but in a positive way. Guys gravitated to him because they want to be winners. They want to build a winning thing there. And I think it was a big part of that 101 win team a year ago. So to me, I see it more as a carryover, but maybe because it's an established identity now for them. Maybe, Mark, is that part of what that vibe, we're using that word vibe, is all about? Because this is now an established identity that they're carrying forward.
I totally agree with that. And I'll add another factor in that I don't think we really talk enough about, and this is not to throw shade at Luis Rojas or, Mickey Callaway. But when you have a manager who's new in a position, it's kind of hard to, pull upon a wealth of knowledge saying, when I managed Eddie Murray or when I managed this guy, Buck has that, and Buck has instant respect of the players, whereas the other guys, listen, they were new to the league, a lot of the young core under, two green managers. That says a lot. And then you bring in guys like Lindor into this and the leadership of Buck, so much, obviously manager of the year, but I don't think we really make enough of what Buck's imprint on this team actually is.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And Howie, I'd like to bring you into the conversation here, because out of everybody in this group, nobody knows Buck as well as you do. You go back to the Yankee days with him. So how much of that, the changing of kind of the culture in the locker room and all that, I pointed to players, but how much of that really solidified when Buck was named manager last year? Oh, you got to unmute yourself.
The first rule of Zoom.
Let's see.
I guess
That better?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, great. Yeah, as you mentioned, I've been with Buck since day one with the Yankees, not in spring training, but that season, 92. He's also changed to a point where, Mark mentioned it, he has instant credibility once he came into the locker room. He had the reputation, managing a number of teams and improving them instantly almost in most cases. And then he would leave and the team would end up winning the World Series. But, he's a terrific manager now. He's the whole package. He wasn't in the beginning. He was raw. He was kind of guarded from the media. He didn't, he was very, very cautious in the things he said, and he kind of like gave this vibe of being so introverted. Now, it's totally different. You see how outgoing he is. He's so great to talk to. You learn from him just from sitting down with him for like 10 minutes. You learn something new every day, and he's a pleasure to watch run a ball club. I feel he gives you an edge in the dugout, which doesn't happen a whole lot around the major leagues these days with these so-called robot managers. Where they get the instructions from above. I believe Buck gives you a real edge in the dugout. 101 wins last season. Any other year they win that division by 8 games. So it was kind of a fluky season. Look, the pressure's on this year, and I think you got the right guy in command.
Yeah. I loved his first press conference at spring training. Talk about a master class of, I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about, not what the media is asking me. He was getting hammered over and over and over again with questions about, boy, the pressure's really on. Can the team, handle the pressure? And what about the end of last season? How much is that hanging over the guys' heads? So what does Buck do? He just spins off into these yarns. He's talking about spider monkeys. He's talking about talent shows. I remember when TJ McFarland in Baltimore, he made the team because he was so good in a talent show. Not so much that he was so good coming out of the bullpen, but he spun off, and then all of a sudden everybody's talking about this stuff. And they've gotten totally away from, boy, that's going to have a lot of pressure on him this season and $370 million payroll. You don't want to talk about that. You don't want to hear it. It was a master class in taking control of the conversation. And that's Buck. You get that from him. I know Russ wants to hop in here. Russ, who is also part of the KINER'S Corner staff. What you got, Russ?
Yeah, just wanted to pose this question to the group because I know it's been asked of me and it's out there. So the age of the starting staff, and also even Senga with his elbow. Mark, has there been much talk about how to manage these guys? Because as an example, like I've been to every opening day since '88, right? So I'll be there. Opening day will be like 48 degrees. Are they really going to have Justin Verlander start in 48-degree weather? Probably not. Has there been any kind of discussion about those kinds of things yet?
Buck constantly makes reference of his white, blackboard, his white blackboard in his office. He's got everything mapped out. He leaves nothing to chance. I think they were already talking about Senga's first start would probably be on the road. I think it might have even been in a dome stadium. That no one seems to be worried about Senga. Senga is, I don't know where this whole elbow issue with Senga came up. Senga's been throwing. He's comfortable. The Japanese
John
press
Heyman wrote it in an article.
Right. And then it just took off. Japanese press was here today. And everyone starts to look at the tea leaves. And so Senga is not going to be starting, but he's throwing a bullpen live on the 28th. So the Japanese media said, like, how come he's not starting? And Buck said, well, right now, 28th, he's got his side session, but he'll be facing live batters, and it's going to be a simulated situation, and it's controlled. And, we do these things. We know what we're doing. We know, he said, on top of it, because last year, obviously the condensed spring training because of the COVID and everything, he felt everyone had to ramp up very quickly. And he thought that was a problem. He says they now have the luxury of time, and he's going to use it. Obviously, again, we've heard this a million times. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. They're going to manage this. They have enough arms. Peterson and McGill are going to be very important to this staff during the season. Obviously, you're right. Quintana is a guy who doesn't go lots of innings in deep. Lucchese and Curtis are wild cards on this staff. So I think they're deep enough to withstand it. But things crop up, and Epler has developed enough depth, I think, to withstand things, other than catastrophic things. Listen, you know what? Last year, we all thought Scherzer and DeGrom. How many starts do we get back to back out of them? It really didn't happen. Things that we pencil in go sideways, and the best guy to handle that sideways after contingencies is Buck, because he really leaves nothing to chance. So I'm not making a big thing of the age, because Verlander is in tremendous shape. It is beyond belief how much this guy takes pride in what he does and how much he dedicates himself. But again, it's baseball. We know as well as anybody, freak things happen, cutting hedges and cutting off a tip of your finger as a pitcher. So, there are things out there, other teams, guys falling down, carrying groceries up the steps. Just those are the things you can't account for. But I think they have enough, resources that they'll be able to manage.
There's one thing this year, though, that makes it a little different. That's a rules change nobody's talked about, which is a limit on the number of times you can call a player back up for AAA and send him down. I think something's only like 3 this year. It's much more limited than it was last year. And I wonder how much that's going to affect the flexibility of bringing up a Peterson, a McGill, a Lucchese, people you normally part in AAA, and bring them back at will.
And you also have a guy on the staff that's a 5 guy. Yeah. So is he going to be guaranteed a spot? Because if he's guaranteed a spot, that takes away from him. And we did speak to Buck about that. He said that's where Billy and his staff excel, and they're going to have those meetings. And, those are hard decisions. You go after a Rule 5 guy, and you have to really see what the guy has in spring training, because if he's not going to be around, you don't want to waste one of those options on a
Well, you think Rule 5 is Darren O'Day?
Right.
Think about he was a Rule 5.
Roberto Clemente was a Rule 5. Yeah. It doesn't get better than that.
Yeah. Zach Green, of course, is the guy you're referring to there. We'll get to the back end of the bullpen a little bit, because that is really one of the few areas that is in question right now. Who's going to fill those final 3 spots or so in the bullpen? But you guys, we're touching on an area that you didn't quite get to there. And you talk about how Buck said, this year he feels like he can take his time, getting his pitchers ready, ramping up not too quickly, which maybe last year they had to ramp them up quicker. You got the WBC this year. And, I know AJ took part in a point counterpoint on KINER'Scorner.com about this. I'm not crazy about it. I don't care if you're a Met fan, a Yankee fan, any fan. It makes me nervous about ramping guys up too quickly. And then I thought Buck also made a really good point this week, saying it's not just ramping guys up too quickly, that maybe Edwin Diaz is going in there, cutting wicked sliders and, ramping up to 100 miles per hour, maybe before he's ready to do so. There's that end of it. But as Buck pointed out, there's also the chance that some guys may not get as many reps as they need. Let's say Jeff McNeil doesn't play a lot for Team USA, whereas here they could, in Port St. Lucie, they could monitor, his at-bats and how many games he plays and how many innings he plays in, just using that as an example. So, AJ, I'll toss it to you. Your overall thoughts on the WBC? You give it a thumbs up, thumbs down? Are you worried about it? Is it in the middle? I tend to be like more of a thumbs down guy on the WBC.
On going, seeing Team Israel play Venezuela on the 15th of March in Miami. Looking forward to that. I think it'll be exciting, good competition, good for baseball worldwide generally. So I have some reservations. Well, if one of the 10 Mets taking part in the WBC gets hurt, so whole genre back and forth. I'm certainly rooting, however, for one of the other American League East teams to lose one of their players in some sort of a hamstring pull. So it probably makes me a bad person.
That's a pretty honest take.
That's pretty rough, man. I'm so
That's a rough day.
I
Come
think
on.
overall, the big picture is it's good for baseball. There are some parallels. You talked about if Jeff McNeil doesn't get played, he can send the backfield for batting points. And that's another big difference. I think by the time it's around, we need to remember the WBC.
All right, so AJ going in and out a little bit there. I want to draw Howie and Russ into this. Howie, let's toss it to you. Like it sounds like AJ is a thumbs up on the WBC. And again, looking at more from, like Commissioner Manfred, certainly it's a thumbs up on it. The players are very supportive of it. They love it, representing their country. I'm not crazy about it, so I take the other side. Where do you stand on it, Howie?
Unfortunately, my position, I have to take a middle of the road, look at
True.
it. So the thing that concerns me, obviously, is, the ramp up and for the pitchers, particularly the hitters, they don't really need a whole lot of swings in the spring. And, they can get their swings in and get ready pretty quickly. So they'll have time even when they come back. You just hope they're healthy. It's the health, matter that goes along with it. You're doing it before the season, the regular season. So the timing may be a little awkward. And, especially if somebody gets hurt. Remember Mark Teixeira got hurt a couple of years ago. He hurt his wrist and he was out for the season. So, these things happen. I mean, it can happen in a spring game anyway, even if it's not a WBC game. So, it's a risky proposition, for the players, but they enjoy it. And some fans seem to like it. So right now it's here to stay. And you just got to hope that your team that you root for doesn't have anybody injured in the event.
Russ, how do you feel on it?
Yeah, I get what Howie's saying, and I was happy that certain Mets decided, like Senga, hey, I'm going to go to training camp because I feel like that's what's best for me. And I feel like if a player felt like that, hey, more power to him. I think that is great. I don't think I worry about injuries that much in the WBC because, again, like Howie said, for hitters, I don't think it's as big a deal. For pitchers, yeah, it's possible you could put pitchers in a situation that it's a little too soon to have them start throwing full speed and closing out games and such. I get it, but there is a risk of injury with everything. And in every other sport we talk about, they all have these pre-season tournaments. They all go overseas now. They're all looking to make extra money. So I'm kind of like, I'm okay with it. There's always going to be freak injuries. Like, let's face it. That's just sports.
All right, so we got the WBC covered. Now going to the team itself. I just did a story this week on I think the Mets are doing the right thing by their top prospect, the top catching prospect in all of baseball, Francisco Alvarez. I got a lot of pushback from Met fans with that story. They don't like it. They want the kid here now. They want him banging the balls to Northern Boulevard. They're so hyped about him, about seeing this kid. He didn't see a ton of at-bats at AAA last year. He has blitzed through their farm system. And listen, that bat maybe and possibly likely is ready for the major leagues already, but not the all-around game. And the way that Billy Epler explained it the other day, that they're not going to force this guy. They're going to take their time. They're going to make sure that when he comes up, that he's ready to be an everyday catcher, not catch a day or two and be a DH the rest of the time. I think it's the right approach. Mark, what have you heard down there? And what is your take on Alvarez? We can't say for sure, but most likely starting the season at AAA.
I think you almost can say for sure that he's starting the season at AAA. Every single pitcher I spoke to, talking about the pitching rules, like I felt, first of all, pitch com is an issue sometimes. Supposedly they've ironed out all the kinks with pitch com. But it's super, super important for the pitcher and catcher to be on the same page quickly. Right? You put a catcher who's inexperienced behind there, and you lose a few seconds and you lose a ball in a critical position, that's tough. But in speaking to all the pitchers, every single one mentioned Nito and Navi. Not one of them mentioned, Alvarez. So I think it's a foregone conclusion. I think they already know that he's not making the big club. The interesting thing with him is that another one of their top prospects in Kevin Prada is a catcher. And he's been through college, Georgia Tech. He's almost major league ready. So that's going to, and if he moves up the ladder quickly, you might see Alvarez as a DH, or you might see him as trade bait. One of the things we were talking about is, you sit around a lot after the workouts and your presses around and you just throw ideas out there and you look around that room. Granted, Ronnie Mauricio is only 21 years old, but he's like the new Wilmer Flores. He's been in the organization forever, but he's blocked. Where's he going to play? Especially if you get Machado next year or whatever.
Well, I could chime in on that. I did speak to a scout, Mark, and that scout, and I won't want to say what organization, whatever, but he's close to the situation, thought the outfield. And I do think that that's possible because, again, Connor's only going to be here one more year. So I think you could get a spot. I would not want to give up on Mauricio's talent just because today you don't have a spot.
No, I agree. But you know what? You're now making Vientos take reps in the outfield, and your Batty is taking reps in the outfield because you're looking for positions where these guys can excel. So there's a lot of talent there. And let's say they're getting close and the Angels are totally out of it. What's a better way to rebuild than if you can get Alvarez, Beatty, and Mauricio for Ohtani? He
doesn't want to play in New York, though.
Well, worse than that is like, I don't know that you give up all your top prospects. I know it's Ohtani. But he's a free agent at the end of the year.
Right.
I agree.
I think you wait and you get it. If you're going to get him, just get him because you paid for him. I don't think you want to give up all those prospects and then possibly not sign him at the end of the year.
Well, I think it would be a conditional trade, though.
Yeah.
Not only that, you're getting him late in this. If you're getting him late in the season, you're going to thrust him into the rotation and the lineup at the same time. There's a lot that goes into that. People think it's so easy. You just snap your fingers, put this guy in, and everything's going to be hunky dory. As Jim mentioned, he doesn't want to come east. I'll tell you what a little birdie told me a couple of years ago. Remember when he got hammered in that first inning against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium early in the year? What was that, 2-3 years ago, before 2019 maybe? He was supposed to pitch against them later in the year, and I heard he didn't want to pitch against them. So as talented as this guy may be, you don't know if this guy is going to be able to function here, especially with all the attention he'll get from not only the New York media, but the Japanese media.
Yeah.
You put those two together, that's a lot of distractions. I'm telling you, that's a big project to bring him in at the end of the year and think he's going to be the savior for your team.
Yeah, go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on the prospect end of it. I also don't think Ohtani wants to play in New York. I've seen enough exculpatory evidence to kind of go with what Howie said on that. But as far as the other guys, Alvarez starting off in AAA is fine. I think the problem is, look, we all know there's not going to be much hitting coming out of the catching position for the Mets. And if other guys aren't hitting and Nito's hitting 220 with 10, 15 RBIs a month and a half from now, that's going to change the pressure point of having Alvarez in AAA. To start, fine. But again, at some point, pitchers are going to have to deal with a young catcher if he's that good offensively. I don't want to make this guy a DH. It doesn't make any sense if you have a homegrown catcher that's this good, why would you ever want to make him a DH? It doesn't make sense to me.
So,
You said
go ahead, AJ.
Nito's hitting 220. 220 we can take because the rest of the lineup is good enough. You think back to last year when both Nito and McCann were below the Mendoza line. And that you couldn't take. 220 you can take.
I think we were also discounting, a guy who was an all-star. Navi's going to hit 15 to 18 home runs from that catcher's position. He's going to walk in.
I don't think he's going to play enough to hit that many, but
I think he will. He's got a relationship with a lot of pitchers on this staff from previous places, and that's important. And I think he's going to be a key part. Listen, you love Nito's defense, but you're right, he can't hit.
Yeah.
So the thing here is, and why the lack of offense from the catcher position last season, why it stood out so much is because they also had another black hole in the lineup, and that was at DH. You can carry a light hitting catcher or more defensive minded catcher. Listen, Narvaez, let's say he's 250 and he's, double digit home runs, which is fair to say. But let's say even if he struggles like he did last year, he was under a 210 hitter last year.
It was terrible last year.
Yeah,
You
206.
can, 206. So as AJ said, I think you can carry that if they're doing a great job behind the plate, but you cannot have two black holes in the lineup. And if that DH spot is a black hole again, it is a major, major issue. And it was throughout last year. I thought they were going to be fine. I thought Dominic Smith and JD Davis going in, I'm like, this will work. Boy, having the DH come to the National League, this is good for the Mets. We got two guys. It's going to fit perfectly. And it was a disaster. Neither guy, lived up to expectations. And then Darren Ruff comes in and that kind of leads into the next part of this. I know Ruff spoke yesterday. We find out now that he's got a wrist issue as well. So we're going to go around. We'll start with Mark and AJ first, then we'll go to Howie, Russ, and come back to me. Is Darren Ruff on the opening day lineup against the Miami Marlins? Mark, AJ, Howie, and Russ, and then me. Go.
All right. I believe that Darren
and
Ruff.
Steve's already putting his thumb down.
Right. And hopefully maybe we can open it up to some questions from the people that
Sure.
we haven't really publicized it, but we're glad that Leaf, Justin, and Steve are in the room with us. So as far as Darren Ruff, his position opening day is DFA. I do not believe he's going to make this team in any shape, way, or form. I think he'll refuse an assignment down to the minors. He'll try to sign on with another team. He's got this issue with his wrist. He's just not he just doesn't seem to be a fit. I think that's why they got Tommy Pham. I think that Pham gives him more versatility. I think that's also, listen, Darren Ruff is your DH/first baseman. You've got every guy for the first baseman club down here to Camden. Guillorme, Buck mentioned that he's, taking reps at first base. Vientos, Batty, they're all getting reps at first base. That is kind of handwriting on the wall. Buck was asked directly, do you think it was just an aberration or, as well he's dealing with wrist. He didn't really give him a ringing endorsement either. And, plus the fact he's wearing 33, that number's not been lucky lately. I mean, it's like, he's changed to that number, not a great number. So we'll see what happens. AJ, go ahead.
I'll take the real cheap and easy way out. There'll be a right-handed pitcher and Vogelback will be the DH. But looking ahead, I think he has a lot to. I think, is he definitely a goner from the team? No. If he has a very hot spring, he proves he's got it back again. I think he's on the bubble, as they say, or on the edge. I would say definitely no, but I think not encouraged.
Howie, what do you think? Darren Ruff, opening day roster?
Let me quote the great philosopher Hyman Roth: "Small potatoes." I don't think he's going to be on the roster. I don't think he's going to be a factor on this team. I think something will occur before the opening day. I just don't see him being a big part of this team or even any part of this team, really.
Before
All right,
Russ goes, before Russ goes. So for those of you watching at home, if you have sculptatory evidence and Roth small potatoes on your bingo card, you're getting close, guys.
I would say this. My one fear is Billy Epler is very invested in Darren Ruff. They traded 2 prospects for him. He spoke highly of him about a week and a half ago, and I think he wants to see him on the roster simply because he endorsed him so highly. So that's my worry, is that he will be there because of the general manager.
Well, multiple prospects and JD Davis.
Yeah.
JD Davis, for some reason, was not enough to get Darren Ruff.
Right. That's a great point.
Listen,
Think about that.
But listen, Russ makes a very good point here, and this is my sticking point too. I just have this feeling that they're like, we got to run it back. We got to run him out there. We got to give him another whack at it, even if it's just at the start of the season, because his lifetime OPS against left-handed pitching is And last year, small sample size, what was it, 78 plate appearances or whatever. That's my fear. I'd rather not see him here. My gut is telling me he's going to be on the opening day roster. The but here to me is, and it's going to sound weird at first because he's a left-handed hitter, but if Brett Beatty goes off this spring and has an amazing spring, and the Mets go, this guy's ready, and he handles the glove. I get it. He's a lefty. Ruff is a righty. But if Beatty is good enough to start the season at third, and I'm on record as saying that I'm like Alvarez, I think Beatty's going to start and will prosper by extra time down at AAA starting this season. However, there's that if. If he is able to show that he's ready, then I think Ruff is an absolute goner, and Escobar becomes kind of your swing guy. He'll DH, he'll play third. Maybe they work him over at first base. Alonso played 160 games last year. I know not all at first, but he's not going to sit much. But you do have to have that backup in place. So I guess what's your take? We'll start with Howie. What's your take, Howie? I see that Beatty almost controls what happens here, and to a lesser extent, if Vientos goes off this spring and they say, rather have the kid and let him be our right-handed DH. Let's see if he can do it, and then we'll figure it out down the line if Vientos isn't ready, but cut bait with Ruff from the get-go. So Beatty or Vientos versus Ruff, what do you think?
I agree with you about Beatty. I'm not that high on Vientos from what I've seen. I mean, look, that's an amateur eye. I'm just telling you what I see. I like Beatty. I like what I saw from him. If he goes off, Russ made a good point that the GM is committed to Darren Ruff. It's almost like the situation with Brian Cashman and Aaron Hicks, because Cashman made this big, deal about bringing in Hicks. Hicks has kind of been sort of a semi-disaster so far. And I can see the relationship with Epler and Ruff. But, look, this Mets team potentially is loaded at a number of spots. Ruff could be a key because he's a right-handed bat and they struggled against lefties last year. I see that being a lot better this year with Alonso. Lindor's a year, more entrenched in New York. I don't see the need for a Darren Ruff over maybe a young guy who could crack this lineup and give you a little more versatility. Don't forget, Escobar's a switch hitter. So, yeah, he didn't have a great year last year, but he had a great September. So he's certainly capable of doing things for them and being part of their process. I agree with you. If Beatty has a big spring, it's going to provide quite a decision for them to make.
Right. And again, in my scenario, if Beatty makes it, he plays third and then third most of the time. And Escobar then is definitely your right-handed DH guy. Because again, the problem with Tommy Pham is that he's also your fourth outfielder. So if somebody goes down or whatever and he's DHing, then you got to figure out, then does McNeil go to the outfield? Or is Danny Mendick the 26th guy on the team? And, he's a swing guy that plays all positions. I know we're going all over the map now. Let's keep it to Ruff, Beatty, Vientos, kind of for that final spot there. Russ, what do you think?
Yeah, the problem with Vientos, and I was told this too by that same guy, is he doesn't make enough contact, and I'm kind of seeing that. So I'm going to take him out of the equation. Of course, I would love to see Beatty because Mrs. Cohen was the first person to point out to me that Escobar can't reach first base half the time. And she's right. Pete Alonso has had to do a lot of covering for his lack of arm, even though his hitting has been good. So you would expect him maybe to be a DH. I think Beatty could be the everyday third baseman, but I still think Darren Ruff's going to be on the team. I'm just telling you, I think the GM is going to make sure he is there opening day. And then, maybe he's gone in a month.
All right, let's send it down to Florida.
Well, just to clarify, when Russ says Mrs. Cohen, he's not talking about Steve Cohen's wife making that comment about Luis Corona. He's talking about his wife. All right, so let's get that clear. That's the last thing we need is a libel suit from the Cohens. One thing you did mention about Tommy Pham, there's a wild card here. We all remember what Travis Jankowski meant to the Mets last year with his speed as that fourth, fifth outfielder. There's a former Yankee here in camp in LeCastro who's also an outfielder, and no one's really talked about him. He's one of those underrated, under the radar guys in camp that all of a sudden opening day, like, how did this guy make the roster? And he's a a consideration in that, especially if you're going to use Pham as your DH. LeCastro gives you that insurance. I do agree with everything you said, Jim, about Escobar and Beatty. Beatty reminds me, obviously different positions, but it was the kind of situation they were in with Keith and Dave Magadan. They had a guy who was going to be there that you weren't going to be able, that it was his position. And, when Dave Magadan came up in 86, when Keith was down a little bit, caught on fire, and then that next spring training, everyone's going like, what's Dave Magadan going to do? And then became a third baseman for a while, So I think that's maybe what we're looking at with Beatty, but I totally agree with you that I think as far as what you said about the GM and it's his guy, he's got an out now. His out is that wrist is balky, it's unfortunate. We really thought he was going to give us something, but that wrist injury is very hard to overcome at his age. The speed that pitchers pitch at, it's hampering him. He'll go down and rehab. We don't know when he'll be back. I think that might be the out. AJ?
Well, actually, I want to change the subject. I talked a lot about this. One of the things we brought up on speed and base stealing. So I was down here looking at today, and I just did the pizza boxes. As the bases, they're noticeably bigger this year. We're looking at, will speed be a greater part of the game overall in baseball this year? And with the Mets, Nimmo has said, I think that he doesn't not going to go out and try and steal a lot of bases.
Well, there is a reason why, and he was
Right,
very
he's right of that. But who do the Mets have? Lindor, I guess. Will the Mets be a speed team in a year in which speed seems to be making a bigger factor? Who's going to be stealing the bases from the Mets?
Yeah, they're not a speed team. There's not a lot of speed there. I mean, Nimmo, has some speed. He's not a good base stealer, and of course, there were factors last year why he didn't even attempt, until late in the season.
He better
attempt a
improve
stolen
that
base.
category. I wrote a piece on that. He better improve there to enhance their offense a little. That's part of the reason they struggled against the Braves. They had no threats on the bases to distract their pitchers.
Well,
you don't have to be a speed team to steal a lot of bases, but at least you got to provide a little bit of a threat, especially with the pitch clock now and the limited pickoff throws. That's going to work to the advantage of the base runner if you play it right. And under Buck Showalter, I expect the Mets to play it right.
Here's what I could add. And this is something that goes under the radar. And look, there's not tremendous speed there, but sometimes guys know how to steal. Jeff McNeil's never been thrown out. Like, you could steal Jeff McNeil more than he's been going.
So here's the interesting thing. In your school, Howie, 100%. Listen, I'm of the Vince Coleman, Lou Brock, speed kills, Ricky Henderson. I spoke to Nimmo yesterday, and the interview's up on the website. And the interesting thing was, and in talking to him, I kind of see his point. So analytically, they said, I'm not a big analytics guy, so don't come crashing down on me. But he said they've done studies that unless you are an 80% stolen base percentage guy, you are hurting the team. And he said in his position, he's an on-base guy. That's what he does. He's a good enough base runner, he said, with the big boppers behind him that hit doubles, that he can score from first base. He doesn't need to steal second base. He said, because if he's thrown out, that could change a whole course of an inning. Do I agree 100% with it? No. But he said that, you have to really pick and choose. Whereas, Ricky Henderson got on, he was at third base with nobody out. I mean, that was just what it was. The game isn't that game anymore. But that to me is an interesting statistic. If you are not an 80% base stealer, you're hurting the team. And that's, say what you will about analytics, but they do the studies, and that's a very interesting number. And he also said that he's also a center fielder. So you need to pick and choose if you're using your legs early in a game to steal that base, and the guy's going to hit a double that you could have scored on anyway. It's typical, I hate to use a basketball term, but it's load management. So I'm on the fence. I hate to be wishy-washy about it, but I am kind of on the fence after speaking to him about it. I am a stolen base guy, but I get where he's coming from.
So we're kind of winding. Well, we're not winding out. We're winding up is what we're doing. Guys are getting fired up here.
We don't have a pitch clock.
Mark is all wound up.
But we are kind of winding up a little bit here. I just want to get to some of the messages. And Justin and Leith and Steve, thank you so much for joining us today for this trial run. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Justin had asked a question about Brett Beatty, which we did discuss. But he also says, don't forget about a healthy Marte as far as the running game goes, because his name was not mentioned. So, Justin, you're right on the mark there. Steve says, okay, larger bases. Okay, we've been talking about that. But he says, what about the banning of the shift? And Howie, I know you just wrote a story about this, how it may or may not affect Jeff McNeil. But in general, specifically speaking about the Met lineup, not all of Major League Baseball, specifically that Met lineup, what do you think banning the shift is going to do either for the Mets, against the Mets, or in a neutral way?
Well, I think some of the batting averages will come up. Lindor batting left-handed, he won't get, that grounder is going to get through now, or that line drive, which drove me crazy, that putting a guy in short right field from the infield. You hit a ball good over the infielder's head, a line drive, you deserve a hit. I mean, that's the way the game's been played for 100 years. They want to put an outfielder in that position. Go ahead, leave left field wide open. I mean, that's their prerogative. But, I think it's a good thing. It's going to help some of the left-hand hitters. People think it's so easy for a lefty to just step up there and hit it to left field. Oh, it's so easy. But the ball's coming in on you at 96, 97 miles an hour on the inside. You're trying to make contact. You're not trying to hit the left field. There's a few hitters who can handle that, like a McNeil, who really didn't, the shift took away some hits from him, but not as much as other hitters, like an Anthony Rizzo on the Yankees, or Lindor left-handed. I'm sure his left-handed average is going to come up this year because, he's going to get more hits without the shift. So I think it's good in that regard. I really do. It used to bother me when a guy would hit a ball well, hit a line drive over the infield, and there's a guy ready to catch it. I know, you want the guy to hit the opposite field, just have them hit to the opposite field. But believe me, I played a lot of ball in my lifetime. I wasn't a major leaguer, but it's not that easy to hit the ball the opposite field, especially against the arms they're facing today.
Though I will say, and you mentioned McNeil, Mets have two lefties that were pretty good against the shift in Nimmo and McNeil. Both guys took advantage of the holes on the other side. I never understood, and then I won't go off on this tangent. I'll just throw it out there, and then we'll send it down to Mark and AJ down in Florida. But to find out what the players think about the banning of the shift, I never understood. Like, if you're a major league team, do you watch, a Jeff McNeil, how he handles the bat? You're giving him this whole side of an infield. I never understood playing the shift really against him. And I know he pulled, some into the shift, but not often enough. And to me, he's a guy that you play straight up all the way around. But that's a tangent. Let's find out what the players think about the shift, because they're the ones that are going to have to deal with it. Mark, AJ?
So I spoke to every player, all right, and I asked the hitters who benefits from the pitch clock and the shift. And to a man, I mean, most of these guys, since they've been in the majors, the shift has been in existence. So it's all new to them. They're not sure. I spoke to Pete Alonso today, and Pete said, well, we're going to find out Saturday, as it goes on. He says he really hasn't given it a lot of thought. He's not sure. The one thing also that they feel that the pitch clock will definitely benefit the pitcher. He said, because what happens is if a pitcher gets on a roll, you can't slow him down. If he's pumping in strikes, and he knows that he's feeling it, you can't step out and you can't delay. So those are one of the issues. But as far as the shift, it's going to be interesting because Buck even talked about moving an out. Do you move an outfielder over there? And Buck, he's the mad scientist. He's going to, if there's a rule created, Buck's going to find a loophole in that rule to benefit him. So I'm interested to see what it's going to be like come Saturday. Listen, you can still shift. You can overshift. You just have to have them on the same side of the infield. So you can play your shortstop directly, behind, right on the edge of second base. So, you can move that second baseman a little bit further back, or you have your outfielder shift over. So, yes, the shift is banned, but it's not really. There are ways around it. So, I'm interested to see what some of the old school managers do with it.
One interested in seeing there are really two sides to the equation. We talk about how it affects the hitters, not having a shift. But how much have we seen do the pitchers pitch to the shift? And we have to
For
see what the
sure.
adjustments they make to picture the fact there is no shift. You can see batters will be pitched to differently than they were with the shift in existence, because clearly they pitched to the shift. And that's what we have to see again starting Saturday when the games start.
AJ, that's a good point. Okay, as we get close to wrapping up here, Justin sent in a question, and Leith and Steve, Justin, if there are things you want to get in before we wrap up, just fire in a question there. But Justin wants to know, and this is, something I can't believe we've 40 minutes here and we haven't gotten to, but does anyone think that a Pete Alonso extension gets done before the season starts? And do you think if it doesn't happen, will it cause Alonso to press, or will it weigh on him over the course of the season? And of course, Pete becomes or is eligible to become a free agent at the end of the 24 season, 2024. And we know the Mets very quietly got a deal done with Jeff McNeil this winter. I think fans talked about it and hoped about it, but there was no word coming from McNeil's camp, no leaking from the Mets side. We woke up one day and Jeff McNeil's got an extension. And I think if that's going to happen with Alonso, whenever it would be, during the season, during the winter next year, before his final year before free agency, whenever it happens, I think that's how the Mets play things now. I don't think that it's going to be leaked and it's, then the rumors build up and Pete gets asked about it all the time. He addressed it the other day, Mark. Tell us what your take is from Pete Alonso, and if there's any inkling whatsoever that something could get done, over the course of this season before we get to next off season.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to get done before they break camp here. That's asking a lot. You're talking big money, but I think he's one of the players that the Mets have built. He's one of the faces of the franchise. The Met fans love him. He's a homegrown guy. It's hard to preach family that Steve Cohen does, and he firmly does believe in family, and let one of your homegrown guys go. I think they'll make Pete happy. I think he'll be long-term. I think he'll get, what he's deserved. And I agree. I think this Met regime is very tight-lipped. You're not going to see it playing out like, what happened with the Yankees and Aaron Judge last year. I think, negotiations are probably ongoing. Pete probably has a number in his head. But, if I'm Pete also, do you rush to get that extension? Yeah, you can get injured. But every year, these numbers, look at what Manny Machado is opting out of because of what he thinks he's going to be able to get. So if Machado next year, why would Pete settle now? Listen, he's signed through 2024, okay? He has a monster year this year. What are the numbers going to look like for him as a free agent? Maybe he waits, or maybe he just has a number in his head that he's comfortable with. That will be what gets the extension done. But I think he's another one of those guys. Listen, you kept Nimmo, you kept Diaz, you kept McNeil. Pete's more of that foundational guy than all of them, really, if you think about it. He's the guy who came up here, lit the place on fire. The home runs, they're only real legitimate home run superstar forever. So I think it gets done. AJ?
Well, I think if you're willing to give that type of money to Correa, you'll certainly give it to Alonso. He's one of your guys. I think you're right. It's probably not going to happen, I think, for the entire season. I think it's going to happen in the next off season. I think they can say, let's put out everybody's mind. Let's play. Let's have the only game in your mind is play the best you can. We'll revisit this at the end of the season. That's what I think is going to happen.
And then the other possibility is, Pete wants, let's say, and why wouldn't he? He may want to get to free agency and have teams compete for him and drive that price up, similar to what happened with Aaron Judge. But do you question that somebody's going to outbid Steve Cohen to retain, Pete Alonso? You gave the examples of Diaz and Nimmo, guys who wanted to stay, but they also wanted to be paid to stay. And he made sure that they were taken care of. And I would argue that if you're taking care of, just as Mark said, if you're taking care of Brandon Nimmo and Pete gets to free agency, you're going to take care of Pete as well. So, who does, nobody wants the agita of sitting around worrying about, that, will he sign, will he re-sign or whatever. It's like an extension, sure. is probably something the Mets would want. And I agree. I think it would be before next season if it happens. But if he goes to free agency, if they want him, and I would assume that they do, you would think that he would get it done. I don't know if we have any more questions. I don't see anything in queue here. Final thoughts, Howie, on the spring so far? Let's get the first games going, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting started, and I'll be the scorer for the home opener for the Mets this year. It's
Oh, Howie, you muted yourself.
Lost out. Yeah, Howie.
You're good.
Am I good?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, well, we got that you're going to be the official scorer at the home opener, and then we lost you.
Yeah, no, I'm always excited around this time of year. Usually about 2 weeks after the World Series, I start to get the itch. So I don't have to scratch now. I can let the itch fester and look forward to the season.
And there we have it.
I think that's
Howie has to unmute himself, and he's got the itch. He doesn't have to scratch it anymore. We have bingo.
And he's festering.
Festering, right?
What do I win?
Man.
Hey, good stuff, fellas. Thank you so
Yeah, it was
much.
good.
Listen,
Thanks
Justin,
everybody.
Steve, Lee, thanks so much for hanging. If you were watching this on the replay, then watch the website, KINER'Scorner.com. Lots of really neat content coming your way. But more importantly, what we really want is we want you. Met fans are a really passionate group. We want to hear, at the end of a series, we're here, we're going to talk, but we don't want to just be talking heads. We want you, talking and voicing your concerns, voicing what you like. We always want to hear the voice of the fans, and that's what we hope to provide at KINER'Scorner.com. We hope to be your multimedia go-to place for New York Mets content. Jimmy, thanks for running the ship back in New York. It's a little hard. I don't even want to tell the people that are watching, how this is set up right now. I might take a picture and we might post it. But just think Carlos Beltran and the Astros, and you'll have an idea of how the cameras are situated right now. Thanks everyone. And
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Great stuff, guys. And Steve, get home safely. I know you're driving there. So you're one of our audience. We don't want to lose you. All right.
Luckily, I'm parked.
Oh, okay. There you go. All right. Oh, the voice of the fan finally. All right.
There you go.
There you go. All right, guys. Thanks so much. And then, I'm flying back home tomorrow, leaving this wonderful place, but can't wait to see the home opener at Citi Field and really talking to the Mets fans.